Hello and welcome to my Core 2021 Cube set review. This is part 2 in which I'll be covering the second half of Wooburg. I'm analyzing these cards in the context of a 360 unpowered legacy environment, specifically my main cube. Link to the cube will be in the description below. I will also be using a grading system that works as follows. S. Instant cube staple with the potential to be banned to power. Examples include Bluchi the Spell Chaser and Oko, Thief of Crowns. A. An archetype-defining card, or a solid playable that has a place in most cubes. Examples include Thasset, Deep Dwelling, Heartless Act, and Sahili, Sublime Artificer. B. A role player that is more dependent on the cube environment to be great. Examples include Thassa's Oracle, Yawgmoth, Thran Physician, and Vivian, Monster's Advocate. C. These cards aren't for every cube, but if you support the archetype they are a part of, they will excel. Examples include Vivian, Champion of the Wilds, Cabal Therapist, and Lava Brink Venturer. D. They have a lot of potential, but have some serious flaws holding them back. A good fit for lower power environments. Examples include Narset of the Ancient Way and Mox Tantalite. F. These cards are inefficient, underpowered, and not fit for a cube. Examples include Finale of Revelation, Kaya, Orjav Usurper, and Bedek Bedazzle. Finally, I want to stress that everything I say here is just my opinion. My cube's environment is not the same as yours, and what is bad in my cube might be good for you. If you disagree with the rating I give, let me know in the comments below. Without further ado, let us begin. Shaundra, Heart of Fire. Shaundra has come a long way since her first iteration. +1 to shock any target is really strong, and putting her at 6 loyalty after killing something may make it difficult for your opponent to take her down. While shock may not be bold, getting to do it every turn will clean up your opponent's board pretty cleanly. The other +1 is a massive card advantage engine as well, provided you don't mind discarding your hand the first time. Her ultimate may be tricky to pull off in a cube deck, especially when you are drawing 3 cards a turn, but even without it, she'll probably take over the game. This is no Torch of Defiance, but she is still a solid walker that will serve you well if you choose to run her. Grade B. Terror of the Peaks. An absolute stat monster that suffers from one problem. This is a Baneslayer. For those of you who don't know, Baneslayers and Muldrifters is a term used to describe creatures. Baneslayers are powerful creatures that will take over the game, but fold to a Doomblade and have no value otherwise. Muldrifters are creatures that get their value immediately, and it doesn't matter if they die. Terror of the Peaks is the former. And while everything it says sounds awesome, if you don't untap with it, you wasted your turn. I'd argue that even though it is a Baneslayer, it is still worth playing. And I'd say this is true for all Baneslayer type cards. Part of the strategy behind cards like this is baiting your opponent to use removal on your other creatures so that this can stick and take over the game. Doing the same thing with the Muldrifter does not win you the game. Terror of the Peaks may not have an Enter the Battlefield, but it is still a strong card, and one I would recommend testing. Grade A-. Transmogrify. Initially, I wasn't too keen on this card, but someone else pointed out to me that with this card, there's now enough cards to support another combo deck in Cube, Polymorph. Polymorph, Luca, and this are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to effects that let you cheat out huge creatures. Add in a lot of effects that create creatures without being creatures themselves, such as Dragon Fodder, and you can cheat out anything you want by turn 4. This is not a strong combo deck, but it is now an option that Cube can choose to run. Grade C. Volcanic Salvo. If you ever want to beat it over your drafters' heads that Gruul is big creatures, this is the perfect card for you. Worst case scenario, you get your board wiped, and they play a Baneslayer Angel, while you stare at this longingly in your hands. Best case scenario, your mana dorks power out a Rabblemaster on turn 2, and you can remove their 2 best blockers by turn 4. This card is Feast or Famine, however, and even when you are feasting, not being able to target their base is a huge letdown. Grade D. Shaundra's Incinerator. This is a tough card to evaluate, because it's so hard to tell what its CMC will even be. Costing anywhere from 1 to 6 mana, this card will either rot in your hand or be a 1 mana 6/6. The primary way you'll be cheating this out is with burn spells. Unfortunately, most burn spells that are being cubed deal more damage than you pay for. Fire Blast enables this as early as turn 2. Even considering the worst case scenario, a 6 mana 6/6 that can have your burn spells hit face while controlling the board is still appealing. Given that its floor is still pretty decent, I'm inclined to test it to see what its ceiling can be. Grade B. Gadrak, this Crown Scourge. 3 mana 5/4 flyer is beefy and comes down really early. If it weren't for that artifact clause preventing it from attacking, this would have been really good, just as a vanilla 5/4 flyer. That being said, Gadrak can still block, and 4 toughness will be stopping most things at that stage of the game. He can enable himself to attack with creatures dying, but if you want to maximize him, he will have to be part of an artifact strategy. My biggest gripe with Gadrak is that the red artifact deck that would want to play him also kills him with Wildfire. If he didn't die to Wildfire, I'd advocate playing Gadrak, but he can still see play in less powerful cubes. Grade C+. Heartfire Immolator. I am always happy to see more Goblin Critter Maker impressions, and Heartfire Immolator does a fantastic job. A 2/2 with prowess is decent, even if it's not exciting, but the real meat behind this card is getting to sacrifice him. Pump him up a few times, swing with a 4/4, then blow up one of their dorks or even the walker. Threat of activation is also really potent with this fellow, as if they do decide to block, you can just blow up something else. I think Heartfire Immolator will not only lead to interesting and exciting gameplay, but will also be a staple of many cube decks moving forward. Grade A. Kinetic Augur. Crackling Drake is a pretty powerful card that is held back by its atrocious mana cost. Kinetic Augur has most of the upside of Crackling Drake with only 1 red pip. Obviously, Trample isn't as good as Flying, and Ravaging too isn't as good as drawing a card, but all in all, I'll take that for something that is so much easier to cast. Kinetic Augur can also serve roles outside of blue-red spells. It's a good top end for aggro, and control decks are going to love it. If you don't support a heavy spell section, I wouldn't care for this, but for those who do, I think this has a lot of potential. Grade C+. Garruk Unleashed. When analyzing this Garruk, I think there is no better comparison than his first appearance in Garruk Wildspeaker. Wildspeaker is what I would describe as the perfect planeswalker, not the most powerful, mind you. He can protect himself, facilitates other strategies in ramping, and has an easy-to-access ultimate. Garruk Unleashed doesn't compare as well in my eyes. +1 to giant growth is great and can push through damage. The -2 that can actually be a -1 is cute. But I don't see this as cohesive of a package as I do with Garruk Wildspeaker. I think this is a solid card, just one that I'm not interested in playing. Grade B-. Elder Gargaroth. Baneslayers are getting thicker. A 5-mana 6/6 with a ton of keywords and a modal way to advance your board state, life, or card advantage on attacks and blocks is insanely pushed. The main thing holding this back is the fact that it's a Baneslayer, of course. Ultimately, just like with Terror of the Peaks, I think this is more than okay. If you figured out how to give this guy haste, or protect it for a turn, or ran your opponent out of removal, you deserve to have a game-ending threat. Grade A-. Garruk's Uprising. Uncommon build rounds are always fun to take a look at, and this one supports beefy creatures really well. Draw a bunch of cards, and give everyone trample. This card also pairs really well with flicker effects. Garruk's Uprising isn't really doing anything special, however. If you support 4 power matters, I can see this being a decent inclusion, but even then, it doesn't do much on its own. Grade C-. Fungal Rebirth. Regrowth is a pretty powerful effect, and Fungal Rebirth is one of the more interesting versions to come out in a while. Regrowing something at instant speed is pretty cool, even if it's limited to just permanents, but the real reason we are playing this card is for the Morbid trigger. This is the kind of card I see as being glue for multiple different archetypes. Selesnya tokens will want this, Golgari removal decks can take advantage of it, and Simic Flash loves casting things on other players' turns. This is not the strongest version of this effect, but I think that many different decks can utilize it, making it have more value than at first glance. Grade C+. Llanowar Visionary. Another card that doesn't blow your socks off, but is instead another role player that can see play in many different decks. Llanowar Visionary compares really favorably to Cultivate. Drawing a card on ETB allows it to work well with a bunch of different cards, and the 2/2 body is not useless. I really enjoy the design of this card, as it's an effect that isn't broken, but is something that every green deck wouldn't mind having access to. Grade B-. Sanctum of All. Shrines are a really fun strategy that are probably not good enough for most cubes. However, much like Maze's End, one strategy you can employ to make this card better is to hand all 10 shrines to whoever drafts this card. Even doing that, I don't know if this is strong enough, since you have to fill your deck up with so much shash to get there. If you really want to make this good, allow it to pull the shrines out of your sideboard as well. But if you're using as written, I'm not convinced this makes it. Grade C. Radha, Heart of Keld. There is a lot to like about this card that may not be immediately apparent. For one, it's not priced at 2 red-green, which it feels like all the Gruul cards are priced at. Second, it's a Land Matters card that also functions in multiple different strategies. Third, you get to play lands from the top without giving away any information. Rada has a lot going for her, but ultimately, I still don't think she quite gets there. She's pretty basic, and there are a lot of effects in Gruul that can easily replace her. Grade C+. Nyambi, Esteemed Speaker. If you're still playing Deputy of Acquittals, Nyambi is much better than that. However, compared to the absolute wealth of playables that Blue-White has access to, Nyambi is pretty low on the list. Bouncing your own creatures is tempo negative, and unless you have a legendary focused cube, that second ability won't come up often. You need a very specific environment to want to play Nyambi, and most cubes don't qualify. Grade D+. Conclave Mentor. Green-White is often tagged as being tokens, even if the token support in green doesn't go that deep. Conclave Mentor offers an option for players to move outside of that archetype and try to go tall instead of wide. Hardened Scales is a powerful effect that has been lacking density, and now with this and Winding Constrictor, an Abzan +1/+1 counter deck can start to emerge. Grade B-. Indulging Patrician. Weaponizing life gain is always appealing, and this provides a dual color option for just that. A 1/4 body is going to stop most aggressive starts, and you only need to gain 2 life to trigger her. That being said, you still need a pretty dedicated life gain section to effectively use her. Gaining 2 life repeatedly every turn can be hard to set up, but the payoff creates a huge delta of life between you and your opponent. At the very least, I like this a lot more than Griffin Airy. Grade C. Obsessive Stitcher. This is the complete package when it comes to Reanimator. Pitch your fatty on their end step and bring it back to torment them later. My main gripe with her is that you need to tap her for both of her abilities, but that's not enough to make me dislike her. If Blue-Black wasn't so stacked these days, she would have been a slam dunk. Even with that being the case, Obsessive Stitcher pulls her weight and is a very respectable card for lower power environments. Grade B-. Maze Mind Tome. 2 mana value artifacts are wonderful little things. Maze Mind Tome, to me, reads as an artifact that puts 4 clues into play, which also has a use outside of cracking the clues. If your opponents develop their board really quickly and you don't have time to draw cards, it is more than okay to scry a couple times with this and gain some life. The beauty of this card is how it can be applied to different matchups and can be used to fill in spots in the mana curve. It's easy to slot into most cubes and has the potential for lots of value. Grade B+. Conclusion. M21 is not going to be a set filled with the Okos, Uros, and Kinnons of the world. Fortunately, there is no Simic Mythic slot. Instead, what this set provides cube owners with is a ton of evergreen staples that are always valuable cards that will see play in almost every deck. It's important for a cube to have access to glue to keep things together, and there is a ton of role players present in this set. What cards are you most excited for in this set? If I missed anything, or didn't grade a card appropriately, let me know in the comments below. Cards I will be testing from M21. Red. Experimental Frenzy for Terror of the Peaks. Phoenix of Ash for Heartfire Immolator. Green. Satyr Wayfinder for Elder Gargaroth. Colorless. Lightning Greaves for Maze Mind Tome. If you enjoy my content, consider following me on Twitter and YouTube, or subscribe to my email list on my blog. You can also support me through affiliate links with TCG Player and Card Hoarder. I'd like to thank my biggest sponsor, Game Grid Lehigh, for making this blog and video possible. Finally, if you want to support me directly, I have a Patreon, which gives you access to my private Discord and several other rewards. And I hope you guys have a great week and an amazing Tuesday.